Hare Gange Mahadev Sri Shankara Parvati Pati Mahadev Sri Shankara.
Namaste, it's Sahara Rose, and welcome back to the Highest Self Podcast, a place where I discuss what makes you your soul's highest evolvement. If it's your first time listening, welcome. I am so excited to have you here today. I'm Sahara, ancient soul in a modern body, and I love taking all things spiritual and mystical and making them fun and relatable because seriously, that's what the world needs right now. We need to ground it all into our reality. So I'm so glad that our paths have crossed. And if you've been here every week for the past 4+ years, I love you. Thank you. And I'm super excited to get this episode started because I can only say this with this episode, but the person who is the guest on the episode today is someone who I have personally been listening to almost every single day for the past year or two. And there has never been a guest that I could say that. So that's pretty exciting, except if maybe I brought my husband on or something, but he refuses to come on the podcast. He's a Scorpio. But astrology, it's something that, growing up, and I've shared this on the podcast before, growing up, I never resonated with astrology because I'm a Capricorn. I was always like, I'm not Miranda from Sex and the City. Like, I'm not serious and organized and very straightforward in that way. I feel like I'm much more fun and joyful and playful. And because of that reason, reading the horoscopes in the back of Cosmo, I thought that's what astrology was. So I never dove into it any further. And it wasn't until this podcast where I started to interview many different astrologers, from Danielle Page to Dr. Suhas Kashirsagar to Laura Plum and now Christopher Witecki, that it continued to open my eyes to see that, wow, astrology is so much more than just your sun sign. That is just really, really scratching the surface of it. But you have your rising, your moon sign, your north node, and I'm continually learning more. And I've really learned so much from Christopher Watecki, especially going into step astrology, which we're going to go into, which is his unique method, what he essentially channeled to take astrology into a really detailed process using the degrees. So he found that in astrology, not one Capricorn is the same as the next Capricorn, or one Virgo, or one Pisces. Why are they all so different? And of course, we have the rising and the moon sign, etc. But he went deeper and realized that it had to do with what degree that sign was in when you were born. So he calls these degrees steps. So you may have been born on step 0 and it was at 0 degrees, or all the way up to, I believe, 29 degrees is the highest one. And these step numbers he found correlates to essentially how many past lives you have in that specific sign, which he goes and explains into so much more detail in this episode. So, for example, I'm a step 23 Capricorn in my sun sign. So that's a master level soul. So I have been a Capricorn for many, many different lifetimes. I can't say it was 23 lifetimes, for example, because you could skip many step numbers in one lifetime, really ascend and go through different lessons, or you may actually have to repeat certain lessons if you're not learning from them. But step 23, which he shares, is related to the mastermind. So for me, I was born having a very intelligent mind. And it's really hilarious because my husband is a step 23 Scorpio. He was like, oh my God, you guys are like the only couple I found who are the exact same step number out of these, 29 different ones. So it tells us basically who we are, the essence of that type of Capricorn. And then he also shares something called the goal story, which is our midheaven. And he goes into more detail of how that's figured out according to your chart. And that really tells you what your soul can be evolved into this lifetime. So for my goal story, I think it was step 26 Virgo, which to me, I had never even heard about a midheaven before diving into Christopher Witecki's work. And in this podcast, we talk about all of these things. So what do the different step numbers mean? How is the midheaven, the goal story, different than the north node? And we also speak about how we can now use this process for manifestation. And he has found that each of these steps really correlates with a specific phase of manifestation, which he breaks down, such as I protect, I believe, I act, I receive, etc., and correlates them with steps that you can take for you to manifest. Another thing that we speak about is this stepping into 5D consciousness. I think the term 5D is super, super buzzing right now. And it's a term that so many of us, we don't totally understand. And also everyone has their own interpretation of it. For some people, it's more, a 5D reality is a more heart-centered reality, and it's more connected to nature and spirit and our highest selves, etc. Whereas other people see it as actually a different dimension, a different frequency that we cannot see each other, almost like ultraviolet rays or infrared. These are different dimensions and frequencies that we cannot see. So some people actually see it as we are actually shifting our matter into a different dimension that we may actually not even be able to see each other, on the same world, which sounds really, really out there. And he's someone who I think does a great job at taking these super metaphysical things and explaining them. And then he also shares about what he sees as the coming energy of June 2021, as well as the rest of 2021. If it's 2021 and you're listening to this, I feel like for me, this has been a much more calm year than 2020. I feel like with the collective, I noticed that we feel a lot more grounded, and we're kind of like, oh yeah, the world's on fire. Like, so what's for breakfast? Like we are almost easier able to adapt with the chaos and the noise. And it's still not over, it's still wars going on and conflict and debates and all sorts of things happening in the world right now. So we're definitely not quite yet in the heaven on earth experience for the collective, but we are tuning into more and more of that frequency as individuals, which can then transcend into the collective. So if you're vibing with what I'm saying, you're like, oh my God, I love what you're saying. I don't know what it is. I want to know more. Or you're like, yep, you're talking my language, girl. I'm thinking about this stuff all the time. Then this episode is for you. And I really invite you to challenge your understanding of astrology and manifestation on all these terms. Let's take it past TikTok, and let's take it past Intro 101, and let's take it to the next level. Because in spirituality, the whole point is we're always meant to be growing. So I think this episode is really going to expand a lot of your views and just show you different ways of being. I think Christopher Witecki, he has a super Atlantean, which he shares, very Atlantean, scientific, rational, integrated with the masculine and the feminine, like playful, but also like really like numerology and systems, and very analytical as well. So if you are someone who's like a scientist as well, mathematician type of person and spiritual, I think you're really especially going to resonate and love this. And he's someone that I've learned from so much. So without further ado, let's introduce Christopher Watecki to the Highest Self podcast. And before we get started, I'd love to share with you this special offer. Do you feel deep in your soul that you have a purpose but are overwhelmed and confused about where to start? Are you a multi-passionate person who needs a clear focus and direction so you can truly make progress and impact this year? Do you know deep down that your highest form of joy is your highest form of service, but need clarity on how to make that your reality? Well, you're not alone. Our school system and society has not trained us to follow our intuition and honor our dharmas. In fact, it can feel like totally foreign territory. But the thing is, discovering your dharma is the most important work you can do. And without discovering our dharma, we will never experience true happiness, because happiness is the byproduct of living your purpose. I was where you might be right now, confused and overwhelmed about my own dharma, questioning if I even had one, if my dreams were just wishful thinking, or if my obstacles had happened to be for a reason because it was my opportunity to share them. And through my journey of deconditioning and unraveling and getting true with myself for many, many years, I finally got the courage to write my first book, second book, third book, my newest book, Discover Your Dharma, and help thousands of others discover their dharmas too. So I'm so excited to bring you the first ever course, the 21-day Dharma Discovery Journey. In this course, in just 21 days, in less than 10 minutes a day, I will be your Dharma coach, guiding you step step by step on how to discover your Dharma. So if you're interested in learning more, head over to iamsahararose.com/Dharma discovery. Again, that's iamsahararose.com/Dharma discovery. The link is in the show notes, and I'm so excited to see you living your Dharma. Welcome, Christopher, to the Highest Self podcast. It's so exciting to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited also.
I was just sharing with you that I've literally been listening to your voice almost every day for the past 2 years. Which I can't say I've ever had that experience with any other podcast guest before. So I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's funny, it's a weird psychology that I guess something maybe like Johnny Carson would enjoy, where you're in people's lives like every day and they sort of build their life around you. And people tell me when they meet me, the first thing they tell me is like, I listen to you every day in the shower. I'm like, okay. Or on the way to work or whatever. So it's an honor.
Yes. And the first question I'd love to ask you is, what makes you your highest self?
For me, what calls me into my highest self is this teaching role. I think I've always had spirituality as I've taken it very seriously in past lives, like where I gave my entire life to it. And I've also completely turned my back on it before. And in this life, I know in my heart, I wanted to combine the two and take, my professional desire to make a difference in the world and mix it with my spirituality. So I find that I get into my highest elevation when I'm channeling and doing reading. As far as when do I actually touch base with my highest self the most, it's when I read and I channel. Like something happens that takes over me and I'm in contact with some of the deepest wisdom that I don't sometimes know where it comes from. Exactly. I know it's my highest self that's channeling, but I think my highest self is also talking to other people. But in my own personal life, for me, it's work to stay in that vibration. I have to, walk every day. I have to chant. I do a Buddhist chant. I have to meditate if I can. Honestly, it's very hard for me to stay completely silent. I have more walking meditation. Yoga is better for me than being completely silent. I don't know if that's an earth sign or chanting. So in my personal life, my highest self takes a lot of work. But when I go to work, it just comes out naturally.
I love that so much. And I remember one thing you said to me when we had our session 2 years ago. You said, your guides are like mad because you don't call home enough, because I wasn't really sitting down and making it a focus. Because sometimes we're like, oh yeah, I'm always connected to my highest self. And now every time I do, I always have that reminder in my head of calling home to your guides and making, space and time to have your divine time where you're in direct connection.
Absolutely. And from what I understand, study from Ascended Masters, and recently I've been picking up the story of Christ. I don't know why. I mean, actually, I know why. I feel like that presence is coming to me and it's time to wrap up the Pisces, age of Pisces. But I realize hearing those stories now as an adult that he was in constant contact with Heavenly Father, and Ascended Masters are in constant contact with higher self. So really just this year is the first time where I've attempted to bring myself back into that space, like while driving, you know what I mean? Or like walking around the lake, to call upon it. But it's a whole different perspective of life living in that higher self all the time.
I love that so much. And you have channeled so much for the collective. And I have been subscribed to Sirius Joy for 2 years. And I'd love to learn more and share with my listeners, what is step astrology? Because this is something I have never heard about before you.
This is something I channeled specifically. I was like the first astrologer on YouTube back in 2007. I had the idea of doing video horoscopes. And I thought, this is amazing, because I was in TV production at the time. I was a producer, and I was like, I'm going to go on the internet. I'm going to create this. And I decided to do 12 horoscopes a day, 5 days a week. So I was doing 60 videos a week on YouTube. And it became really clear very quickly that the planets don't move very much in 24 hours. Like, what am I going to talk about? And once I was forced to produce content, and I have this, side of me to produce content, I really started paying attention to the energy every day. And realize, my gosh, today is totally different than yesterday. And the planets have only moved 1 degree. They've moved 1 degree. Why is today so intensely different than yesterday? And everything is the same transit of Taurus. Well, at that time, I had been opening up and channeling more and doing readings. And so I was bringing my reading self into the studio. And that's how I would do the horoscopes, is I would channel the horoscopes for each of the signs. And at one point, my guides kept saying number two, number two, number two. And it was so clear. And I had goosebumps like the whole 9 yards. Like, my God, I'm like going into convulsions over the number two. And I looked down at the page and I saw, holy crumoly, like almost every planet was at a 2 degree, like some sort of a degree with a 20 or was ending in a 2. Like there were 2s all over the place. And suddenly I just had this flash of inspiration. Is it possible that this degree is actually tied to a planet? And then I put 2 and 2 together with Linda Goodman. She had broken the code for the planets and the numbers, most of the numbers. And so I started experimenting with that. And as I began to channel, it became very clear that my guides were giving me additional information. I think about the lost art of astrology. I think it was something part of the ancient past that I channeled back. And in essence, what it proposes, and I believe is completely true, I've been doing this for 15 years now, it's so spot on, it's ridiculous, is that consciousness actually cycles through all of the planets and all of the step numbers, what I call them steps, which are degrees, throughout life. So just like the planets cycle through Aries, Taurus, Gemini, etc., they also cycle from their designated number. And the cycle is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so what I came to discover was, oh my gosh, this is the missing link to astrology, because astrologers can sort of do aspects and we can do planets and houses and we can do these types of things. But like, what is going to actually motivate the client in that last moment? And what I discovered was it's the degree. That in this 360-degree reality, it's almost as if God universe has programmed in these 360 degrees, which is really sacred geometry and mathematics, that in this circle of 360, that can be divided into these 360 degrees, which come down to 12, right? And 12 set of 12. And within that set of 12, God is basically scanning through the spectrum of awareness, just like we scan from, Roy G. Biv in colors from red all the way to back to violet, that there's this spectrum. So I started analyzing and being very quiet about it. And I realized each day we have a different ruling planet based on the degree that the planet happens to be on. And so it added like another 6 feet to the interpretation. We know Taurus is in a sign. We know it's at a certain degree. And then when we add up that degree and it adds together like numerology when it's a double digit, you have the final say. That planet is the final say of that degree. So for instance, if I may use your chart, you were telling me that you and your partner were 23-degree people. And 23 adds to a 5, which tells me this is an intellectually ruled. 5 is Mercury. And so that tells me, these people are intellectually ruled. And once I started applying it to the astrology in my readings, which is the most brilliant feedback you get is from an intimate reading, I realized, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what designates why is one Capricorn completely different from another Capricorn and they're born one day apart. And the answer was it's the degrees and the way they add up comes to a ruling number or a ruling planet. So where it gets really interesting, and as I started to channel this, I was waking up during this period. Once that sort of cracked open, I would wake up like in that haze between waking up and, in the morning, and I'd be getting these downloads of like yellow is the number 2, like almost like it was like a psychological child thing. Blue is the number, like number 6. And I'd be like, blue and 6, like it didn't make any sense. But as things started to unfold, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm decoding like the spectrum of consciousness of how it relates from numbers to colors and to planets. And I realized, wow, we basically have 12 colors of consciousness, which are the 12 signs. And this went into my overall understanding anyways. And these 12 colors are constantly cycling and people choose the color. What gets really interesting to me is like a Taurus, I found out in my research, is a 10, is the number 10. And you'd think that it would stop at 10, but there's 12. So really it's from 0 to 11 that the spectrum is. So 0 is Pluto or Scorpio, and 11 is Virgo. But if you start to realize, okay, so 1 is Leo. And so that means a Taurus, therefore, is technically a Leo and a Scorpio that had a baby, because Taurus is 1 and 0. And I realized, a Virgo, this makes total sense, is technically 2 Leos trapped in a body. And that really made sense if you know Virgos, because they want things every direction. And it really started to give me a lot of clarity also about how consciousness is constructed. And this is completely unique, and I haven't seen it anywhere in anyone else's work. So I have nothing to compare it to. But for instance, 25, so the degree 25 is the highest 7 you can get in a 30-degree cycle. And so 7 is Neptune, it's our spirituality. And I realized, okay, so 2 and 5 make 7. They add together, which means that emotion and the mind is 5 and 2 is emotion. When emotion and mind work together, it opens up spirituality. So I had this other paradigm that opened up, was like, oh my gosh, this is literally giving me the formula to focusing consciousness to tune into specific frequencies and tune into different states of awareness. And there are many ways to skin a cat, so to speak, because you can reach a 7 by 6 and a 1, which is the heart, number 1, opening up, step 6. So if your heart opens, you get to a 7. If you innovate, step 4, your beliefs. So if you take your beliefs to a higher level, you can get to your spirituality of 7. And you could, of course, go to from 0 to 7, just open up to spirit if you're like a yogi up in a cave. So the step system gave me this amazing mathematical approach to adding up consciousness. And in personal readings, it has just been the lifesaver and the breakthrough. Because what you tend to find is that people, and this is the way I look at astrology, is that we're all astrology signs. We are God consciousness, and we fractal off into certain little specifics. And so my approach is that we are good at some states of awareness. We're aware of some states of awareness, but we are inexperienced in others. We're just not good with emotion. We're just not good with intuition. And so what I would find in my readings is I could determine, the client is broken down in this particular state of awareness. And then whenever I found that number somewhere else in their chart, I knew that that part of their life was breaking down because that core number was not functioning properly. So the step system gave me a precise ability to calculate how the client is working and how far along they are. Another fascinating thing about the step system that blew me open was experience level. The reason why I call it the steps is because I downloaded and learned and studied with my clients. And I took like 7 years before I told anyone about the step numbers. I just used it as my secret sauce and just studied it in the background to see, does this work? Because I knew it was kind of revolutionary, different in astrology. But I realized, anyone who is in the first decan, the first 9 degrees, that's a certain spectrum of life, which is your relationship to yourself. And I realized the next 10 degrees are the spectrum of day-to-day life. And I realized the final decan is actually the spectrum of long-term, future, and big picture sort of things. And I realized each step, if you're at step 23, it's not that you just miraculously pop into that step out of nowhere. Your soul has learned every step up to step 23, that each step builds on the other step. And you have to know a step to build that step concretely. And it makes sense if you think of the sense of like an embryo dividing. It's like 2 cells go to 4, goes to 8. Step is the same way. You start with sort of nothing of awareness, and you start awakening and getting more and more awareness under your belt. And so I recognized each of these numbers, each of these degrees builds on the prior degree. And you have to have that prior degree built in. So it's not just a random address of where the planet is. It is a precise acknowledgement of how awake and aware that client is in that particular spectrum of consciousness. And if they are bad at a step leading up to that step, then that's where the holes are, so to speak, in their parade and where they're having a hard time manifesting. So to bring it back to the simple things, it makes total sense if you go through it. Step 0 is Pluto. So the consciousness starts with 0, which is all and everything of God, right? And it's just like the Bible. It was dark and then it was light. And so you start with that 0. And then from that nothingness and everything, you go to step 1, which is the sun or Leo. So it's like, of course, that makes total sense from creation. We start from nothing and we come out with love. And then from that love, step 1, you feel the love, step 2. So step 2 is the moon or our emotions. So we experience love and we experience as felt, step 2. You can't feel anything unless you have love and you have defined your existence with step 0. So each step builds on that. And then step 3 is believe or Jupiter. So once your heart is acknowledged and you feel it, well, then step 3, you can believe it. And this goes on. I can go through the whole system. I don't want to drag you through it in this particular session unless you ask. But ultimately, each step builds on the other. And so what I was able to determine was that you can figure out precisely where a client is tripping up over a step. And these steps actually lead to wholeness. Step 11 is Virgo, where we become whole. And so using the step system, I would say most of my work in the last 7 years has been helping people heal and become whole. I haven't even really gotten us to what we're manifesting with that wholeness. I would say that's where we're headed now with my tribe. But we've been just working on fixing in the holes and using the step system to figure out where am I lacking and where am I awake.
I love that so much. So if someone were to look up their chart anywhere or in Sirius Joy, they would see what degree, first of all, their sun sign is at. Like it's at 7 degrees, 23 degrees, etc. And if it's in the first 9, you said, was that the
Yes.
first part? 9. So is that the number of like lifetimes they've had specifically in that sign or in general?
I believe it's their experience in that sign over lifetimes. And that's actually only from my own knowledge. I happen to know a couple of my past life charts and who I was in past lives. And I looked at the charts and I'll be darned, it's the same energy at lower numbers. It's incredible. And so I realized, wow, okay, I think I'm waking up over the time. So 0 through 9 would mean you're a beginner at that particular state of awareness. And I look at the 12 signs as the 12 parts of being human. Like I said in the beginning, we're all signs. And each of these states, I call them states of awareness, really not astrology signs, are states of understanding being human. So as I mentioned, we don't have time to focus in all 12 states at the same time. In fact, it takes entire lifetimes to get good at a particular state. So a lot of clients come to me after they start Sirius Joy is like, I'm a beginner at everything. You know, they're sad. They're like, the numbers are under 9. But then when I look at their chart, I'm like, oh, you've got Pluto way high in the 20s and you've got Saturn way high in the 20s. Your soul has been a master at these other things and obviously skipped out of gym class or skipped out of these other rudimentary things like emotion. And so, yes, when it comes to emotion, Cancer, you're very young. Or when it comes to intellect, you're very young because your belief, you put it all into belief in past lives where you just blindly believed and didn't need to know the facts. So you can't assume that you are young per se. I think it's more about experience.
So once you have completed all 27 steps in a certain sign, do you then shift to the next sign or a sign that like your soul just needs at the time? How does that work?
From what I've studied in reincarnation and astrology, it looks as though, again, we're downloading this, but it looks as though that when you reincarnate, you follow a shape of sacred geometry and it's not linear whatsoever. So you kind of think of like the Star of David in astrology or in a chart. You might start as, you might start with your sun, let's say in the 3rd house, and then the next lifetime, it's across the way in the 9th house, or it's like over in the 7th. Like it does like a Star of David and goes way over to the 7th. And then from what I understand, where you make it about relationships. In the next life, you make it about your ego. So from what I understand, there's a certain sacred geometry shape that you have to follow, which means that every few lifetimes, you might be up again to continue on that path. That's what I've learned so far.
Got it. So we have on average 27 lifetimes in the same sign.
Well, no, not per se. First of all, it's 29 degrees.
29, okay.
It's 30 plus, it's 29 plus 0, so it's 30. No, I don't think so. I think actually we can go very far in a spectrum. So for instance, one of the things that I learned in my readings is a person could be born, let's say, with a 21 degree sun. They're a master. Anything past 20 means you're now a master of that particular sign. A master meaning you're going to push the envelope for the planet. You're going to do something with this spectrum that we haven't seen before. You're going to be a leader of Capricorns or a leader of Tauruses or a leader of Cancers and set the stage for where it's going. But I'll find clients who'll then have like Uranus, which is an innovative planet, at like 28 degrees. So they'll be born at 21, but they have Uranus at 28. And so the way I channel when I read too, I do connect to the angelic realm. The angels will tell me right away, like, oh yeah, she started as 21, but she's going for 28 this life. Like she expects to bring that conscious up to the 28th degree. And that's where the steps really help me because 21 is a different conscious focus. 21 is what you feel your heart wants. 28 is being committed to a feeling. So in coaching the client, the step system makes it precise because it's like you're right now feeling your heart all the time. But if you want to pull off this mission, you're going to have to commit to a certain feeling and hold that feeling as a constant.
I love that so much. So would you say our Uranus is what we should be looking for, or our midheaven, or our north node? It seems like everyone's talking about the north node as like, kind of the north star of what we're our highest selves, what we're meant to be in this lifetime. But you have the goal story, which is the midheaven. Can you explain more of that, how it's different than the north node?
Sure. The North Node and the South Node represent, first of all, you have to understand sort of what they are mathematically. The North Node is calculated by the crossing of the sun's orbit, the ecliptic, and the moon's orbit. So when the sun and moon actually cross each other in their orbit, if you're going to draw little imaginary circles for each of their orbits would have a crosshair and make like an X on the map. So what a North Node really is a hybridization of your heart, the sun, and your feelings, the moon. And so, by the way, your heart is step one, your feelings are step two. So we're talking about ones and twos here as far as consciousness.
So it's the planet between your sun and your moon.
It is actually where the sun and moon conjunct, where their paths come to a crossing. So the sun might be over on the right side of your chart, the moon might be over on the left side of your chart, but the north node might be like, in the top of your chart, because where their orbits, if you drew a circle for their actual orbit, where they cross is actually the north node, and where they cross underneath that is the south node, right? So what that ends up telling you is the nodes are a hybridization. It ends up being a hybrid. It's it's the mean or the average. You could say it's the average energy between the sun and the moon. If the sun and the moon had a baby, it would be the north node. Well, the sun is your heart, what your heart wants, and that is the power of your soul right there. And the moon is your vibrational experience. So all the feelings that come up in your life, those are all the actual micro vibrations of your soul vibrating at various degrees and various wavelengths to create, the sensation of emotion. So between your heart and your feelings, you have the history of the soul. And so the nodes are really the history of what the soul has been feeling and what their heart has been wanting, the average of the two put together. The south node would represent what you have been feeling in the past and where your heart and feelings have been connected to the past. And see, that's what's interesting. The north node is where we're meant to push our heart and feelings now. Now, your heart and feelings have to do with your own personal experience, like what you're going to experience as a soul, what you have to let go of, and what you have to go toward. And what's interesting about the nodes is it definitely says that whenever you pick up any given life, you're basically doing the opposite of some other life. Like the nodes say to us, hey, okay, time to do the opposite. You used to do this, now you must do the opposite. So we know as far as reincarnation, some of it is based on complete polar opposite, like, okay, try the other side of the coin. The midheaven is what I call the goal story. And the midheaven is the highest point of the chart, which is sort of the highest point the sun will shine on your birthday. Like, that's the highest point the sun will reach in that day. The highest point is the highest point you will take your life, or the highest point you will take your heart in this lifetime is going to be to this highest point. So the midheaven really says to us, oh, her heart and feelings are going to go from this to this with the north node. But in this incarnation, she's going to take her love, the sun, to this height. This is how high she's going to take it. This is how high it's going to go. And I use a system with equal system with a floating midheaven. So not everyone has agreed to that. So that means that the midheaven can go into the 10th house. It can swing even as far as the 8th house in some cases. So it tells you the midheaven exactly where their legacy and the path they're going to leave behind. You could look at the midheaven almost as the wake your soul leaves behind in the boat. Like you're going to leave this wake behind you. So it became important to me because when a client gets a reading, like the first question is, what is my life purpose? And the first thing I look at is like, well, let's see the wake you're going to leave behind you. And so I look at that midheaven, and that's where the step numbers really tell me, because it's like, how do I pull it off? Here's the formula. So the degree of that midheaven tells you specifically how to go about making that wake happen from an internal coaching perspective, the energies.
Yeah, I was shocked to find that mine was a Virgo step 26. I was like, okay,
really?
I got
Why?
a lot of. Well, I never thought about Virgo because I typically didn't have it on my planet, and I'm not a very organized person. I've always thought Virgos are like type A, organized, clean freaks, and I'm not that. So I'm like, okay, I'm a 23 Capricorn with 26 Virgo is a lot of earth and a lot of high step numbers in my chart. So obviously something paradigm shifting with the earth. I don't know what it will be.
So, and what's your north node? I'm just curious.
Capricorn.
Oh, that's right. So but it's a higher degree than your sun. It is. I think so. I looked at your chart, isn't it?
Yeah. So if someone's sun and moon is the same sign, then their north node would be that sign as well, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, very exact because of the ecliptic crossing. They're already in the same sign. So, yeah, your north node, you're a perfect example. Your sun's at 23 and your north node is at 28.
Okay.
You basically are used to vibrating at a 23, and God Universe is saying, okay, we need to take that up to 28. And so that tells me right away, she's not going to end up being a 23. She's going to start as a 23, which is an intellectual master of intellect, but she's going to end up being a 28, which is manifest. And your sun's in the second house, which is the house of 28. So it's clearly to manifest. But the midheaven, 26 Virgo, Virgo is reality, actually. So I believe that consciousness is invisible until Virgo. So all the signs up until Virgo are invisible consciousness that are all making up vibratory precursors to what it ends up becoming, Virgo. Virgo is what it ends up becoming. And Virgo is step 11. And step 11 represents the law of attraction. When the one attracts one that looks just like it, that's what 11 is to me. It's when one attracts one. So people who are working to be Virgo, yes, they're organized and whatnot. That's because they're hyper aware of reality. And so because they're hyper aware of every molecule, for their own sanity, they have to organize. That's just their own thing. And that's just part of, I think, of having so much awareness going through you. You have to sort of quiet a lot of it by having it put away in cabinets. You know what I mean? Like it and organized. But I know chaos Virgos too, who you walk in the room, you're like, how can you live like this? And they know exactly where their toothbrush is. And it's like organized chaos in that same sense. But 26, just to decode it, 26 is a Capricorn number. It adds to an 8. So this is where step astrology to me just makes so much sense. So of course a Capricorn is going to be a Capricornian Virgo. Could have been any degree of Virgo, but you'll be a Capricornian Virgo. And Capricornian 26 is the leader. So it adds to the 8. It's the highest 8 there is. So that means a leader. And a leader in those high degrees of Virgo would be a leader in healing, a leader in transformation for the better, or reorganization for the better. And it comes from, the 26 is from opening your feelings to your heart, basically, from your heart opening. Because the 2 is the moon and 6 is Venus. So for you, you're putting together your feelings and the openness of your heart to be a leader in healing.
And do you tend to find there are similarities in numerology with the birth date and name and this? Because I know in numerology, I'm an 8. So I'm like, whoa.
There is. And although I haven't sat down and like nerded out on it, I will tell you that the numbers in your chart you will find everywhere. The step numbers you'll find everywhere. It definitely, like hotel rooms, like addresses of where I end up living. Like I'm always manifesting those numbers everywhere. And in my own numerology of my name and my last name and all those different things, same numbers are coming up in different forms.
I love that so much. And you talk a lot about using the step system to personally manifest and all of the different, stages of manifestation. Can you speak a little bit more into this?
100%. First of all, my goal with this whole thing was I wanted to crack the code of how to manifest. I'm like, there must be some code, like wiggle your butt, then touch your nose. Like, what is it? Like, what is the code to manifesting? I know God's got it like in the Matrix. I want to know what it is. And I literally was praying to God, like, what is the formula to manifestation? And I literally got it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I was like, no, because when I first learned the step numbers, I'm like, no way. Because, if you look at astrology, it's like Taurus is 10, and then it goes to Gemini, which is 5, then it goes to Cancer, which is 2. So the sun doesn't go around in the order of the numbers. But then my guides were very funny. They're like, yeah, because people would start manifesting pink elephants out of their nose. Like, you can't have the sun going through the steps because people will constantly be manifesting and not even know it. It has to be in this, convoluted way. And even the way that God unfolds, it's very fascinating if you look at it as far as human development. So I realized, oh my God, it's 0 through 11. That's the secret code to manifestation. So I started doing some experiments in my own life. The last time was when I manifested a house out of nowhere. And basically it works this way, that what you be is what comes. So I believe that we live in the law of attraction. What the energy you be is what comes. That's what become is. You be it and it comes. And so what I realized was our consciousness has to vibrate and become what we want to receive. We have to become the millionaire. We have to become inside of ourselves and our energy, the successful actor. We have to become that and live that, and we will then attract it in our life. So using the steps, I realized, okay, what we need the way to do this is to just follow the path of the universe. And for at least 11 days straight, although I've gone to a 40-day program, you consciously hold and become what it is you want to become. And each step or state tells you what to work on that day. So on the first day, you work on the boundaries, which is step 0 for Pluto. So you define what are the boundaries of this manifestation, where does it end, where does it begin, what is my out, what is in, and just any kind of boundary you can possibly imagine. And just really, the thing about conscious is it's just consciousness. You just have to think it and own it, and it's done. It's not, which is really the secret to Sirius Joy, because we're just sending messages and people just, you read it and boom, you're done. There's nothing to meditate, or there's no quiz. You just incorporate it. So what I discovered, and I did this with the house, is for 11 days, 12 days, I would focus on this house using each of the steps on each of the days. So the first day was where it is and where it's not as far as neighborhoods. And the next day is step 1, what my heart loves about it, what my heart loves, I love sitting outside. I love sitting in the sun. I love being in my bathroom with a big tub. Like I just empower that. Step 2 is I feel. So the next day I added the emotion to it and how I was feeling in different parts. And then you go to belief and you go to all these different steps. It's belonging, it's thought, step 5, it's accepting, step 6, surrendering to the spiritual path, step 7, step 8, deciding and committing. Step 9 is taking action. So it's really not till the 9th day that I actually checked Craigslist at the time. Which was how far back this goes, to see what was renting in the area. So you don't take action until the 9th step. And then the 10th step, you hold space. And the 11th step, it starts to arrive. And ultimately, that is what I call the 11 steps of Sirius Joy. By holding those steps for 12 days, you begin the manifestation process. And then from that point on, you maintain the core of your vibration as challenges come. So after 11, it becomes, okay, the wrong house just came. Now what are you going to do? And so you sort of hold that core. And that's what I discovered. And I manifested a house out of nowhere, the exact house I wanted.
That is amazing. I definitely need to sit with that process more. And what do you think karma has to do with this? Because you speak a lot into karma. And a couple months ago, it was like really about not falling into the same karmic loop and repeating the cycle all over again. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes. To me, karma, first of all, is unresolved issues in our soul. So our soul, and this comes also from doing readings, because I'm a full-on psychic. I actually didn't study astrology very much. It became the language in which I talked to my guides with. And I learned astrology from my guides, really. So as I did readings, I could see, I had flashes of what the karma is for the client. And ultimately what it is that your soul has gone through some sort of ordeal that the soul has not been able to let go of. So karma is something you haven't been able to let go of. Now, sometimes you don't let go of it because it's incomplete. And everything that we create has to come to a completion. That is the cause and effect of things. So sometimes karma is that you started a process and you didn't complete it. So for instance, in this life, I intend to complete this path right now as a spiritual teacher. I don't plan for it to be interrupted. But if it were interrupted for some reason, that would then be stored in my soul as something to be resolved and completed. And that usually shows up in the chart, by the way, through Chiron, Black Moon Lilith. I use a lot of Black Moon Lilith. Waldemath is another form of Black Moon Lilith. All these different variations give you like a size of what the client is struggling with. But most karma is personal anguish. Most karma is that certain factors happen and you fall into some sort of state of being. And the karma is that you're stuck in this certain state of being, such as stuck in trauma, or stuck in fear, or stuck in terror, or stuck in laziness, like no motivation. And it's an energetic funk that people fall into. And most karma, to me, is not the bad things that happen to you. My car was stolen. It's the funk that you fall into after it happens. And the karma quote is, can the client get themselves out of it? Ultimately. And so to me, and sometimes karma is you just have to experience things. So I think, they say what comes around goes around. So a lot of times karma is you took an action and you received the consequence of that action, as we've all understood. So if people have done harm to others, they will inevitably be harmed.
And one thing that was helpful for me is like sometimes if we don't let go of this lesson, we can repeat it again and again and again. So how can we shift our lessons to be from a place of ease rather than these dense, tough lessons over and over again?
That's a very good question. I believe that there's a way of living life, a formula to living life. It's super simple. It's live in your heart, and nurture your emotions and stay present with your thoughts and be mindful of yourself. So these are just some certain fundamentals, I think, to life. And what ends up happening is our ego, for instance, chimes in and gets defensive and starts to ruin the show. So most of karma comes down to the way you respond to yourself. And I think the get out of karma free card is if you love yourself and you forgive yourself and don't hold yourself in judgment and you nurture your feelings instead of resist them, you will come out of anything. It's really that simple. It's really about loving ourselves and going back into those principles of living a higher vibration life, living your highest self in the moment. So the answer is live your highest self in that moment and be there with yourself through that moment. And I believe once the karma is experienced, it's sort of burned off. It's sort of like once you've already been through, the hype of being married and then perhaps a person goes through a divorce, the second marriage, you're like, once you've experienced it, there's no more emotion around it. It truly is over. So most of, I think, karma busting is about being there for yourself through the process so that it can be sort of used up like a film. It gets used up energetically. Once the energy is spent, I think it's over.
And do you think that we have certain karma to play out with specific people, or it's just a lesson and then whatever other soul needs that lesson will just become a vibrational match and play that role out to each other?
That's a brilliant question. I believe it's both. I believe that we absolutely have karma with other people where a person has, we talk about falling into funks. So a lot of times there's a person who falls into a funk, and then when they fall into their funk, they abuse another person. And that second person allows the abuse to happen and they fall into a funk. And so there is absolutely karma where the two tangoing together make it worse. And if you have an issue where you have allowed a person to take your power away, it seems in my experience with my clients that you must inevitably live a day where you don't. That must come full circle. And I see a lot of times that people are brought back together and one party will be awake and will rise up and the other party will resist and refuse. And so in that case, what I see is the party that rose up moves on and leaves that karmic situation behind. And that person who refused to grow ends up finding a new dance partner who also has abuse issues and wants to work it out. So I think we have specific to others, but we can graduate that and move on. And in that case, the party that refused gets a new partner.
So do you think that before entering a relationship, we should see what someone's goal number is to see where we're both heading in this lifetime?
You absolutely can. I, for one, have never, when it came to choosing people and choosing jobs and choosing anything, I still say your heart and your feelings know what's best, period. And so in that way, I go with my heart and feelings, and then I look at the goal number and I look at the step numbers and I go, how's this going to work? What am I being shown? I personally, when it comes to relationships, the wake you leave behind on the planet is probably only important if both parties intend to leave a big wake. You know what I mean? So you are married to a master and you are a master. So yeah, for you two, I would be like, are these masters on the same path? Are they heading in the same path? The step number sort of tells you what parts of the consciousness they're working with and what's ruling them at the end. And I think it's really helpful with partners to know at the end of the day what's ruling them. So for instance, at the end of the day, your mind is ruling you and your mind has the final say of everything. And so I would say in a reading to you, you consciously need to look at your feelings because your mind is real quick to just push them to the side. And so you have to make a note for yourself to look at your feelings. So I think what you get with the step numbers in partnership is where their focus is, and that gives you understanding of where they're not paying attention. So I would say in your relationship, it's really important to talk about your feelings because that's not something either of you would bring up. And it might be what's actually the problem. The mind keeps thinking well, what's the matter? Well, everything seems fine, but it doesn't feel fine. And the issue is, mentally everything is fine. It's the emotional level, step 2, the moon, that is unresolved. So I think the step number gives you clues on where to look.
Love that so much. We'll take a quick break so I can give a shout out to our sponsors. If you're a High Self podcast listener and an Ayurveda lover, you probably already know how good turmeric is for the body, but maybe you aren't getting enough because let's be real, turmeric does not go with everything, but a really good golden milk latte, I swear there is nothing like it. So I have the most incredible elixir recommendation for you, and that is Organifi Gold. It's a blend of not only turmeric, but also paired with ginger, reishi mushroom, lemon balm, and turkey tail mushroom. I love having it before I sleep. I'm someone who really craves desserts at night, but it allows me to have something that's warm and dessert-like without the excess sugar, so I can wake up feeling refreshed without the drowsiness or the stomach aches I get when I often eat late at night. So if you want to get your hands on some, head over to Organifi.com/Sahara or use coupon code Sahara for 20% off. You can find that link in the show notes. Did you know that your cell phone emits potentially harmful radiation? Dozens of peer-reviewed studies, including the National Toxicology Program's $30 million government-backed study, have linked exposure to health effects such as cancer, brain tumors, infertility, skin disorders, and more. So what do we do about it? Well, Safe Sleeve, a company founded by 2 engineers, provides incredible solutions with phone screens, laptop screens, tablets, and so much more to keep you safe. I highly recommend using it. I'm someone who's on social media all the time, so it feels good to know that I have an extra layer of protection. In fact, their FCC accredited lab testing shield technology can block up to 99% of the radiation emitted by your electronics. You can head over to safesleevecases.com and use coupon code Sahara for 10% off, and you can find that link in the show notes. And you've been speaking a lot about moving into 5D and these different portals into 5D, and like kind of getting on that bandwagon or not, depending on just how we are responding to ourselves. Can you speak a little bit more into this?
Yes, I believe this is just my pure on belief right now, studying the planets. This is the end of the age of Pisces, first of all. People say it's the beginning of Aquarius. Yes, that's true. But we actually have not integrated Pisces, which is basically what Christ and Buddha were teaching, that we are multi-lifetime beings, that this is a temporary moment of incarnation, and building our life from this perspective of spirit first, physical second. Mind you, in Pisces, we're coming out of the age of Aries, which is the most ego, most detached, most segregated consciousness from spirit. So Pisces was going from pure ego to now going into pure spirit. So as far as 5D is concerned, I think first and foremost, the gateway is opening. So I believe that the entire solar system is moving into a spectrum in coordination with the galactic center. So I think we literally didn't have the bandwidth during the dark ages. I personally believe, and this is me looking back and remembering past lives, that we were crunched pretty much energetically into that ego form. In other words, we were only aware of ego. We were only aware of fight or flight. We were only aware of what's 6 inches in front of our nose. And we have been waking up slowly through the age of Pisces to these energies that happened before physical reality. So in this particular moment, we have this gateway opening up to raise our vibration. And from a planetary perspective, that gateway is all this energy in Aquarius. So Aquarius to me is the door. It's number 4. It adds to 4. 4 is the door. And I believe Aquarius is an energy that sort of envelopes reality itself. So I think when we say we live in 3D or 5D, I believe that Aquarius is what determines 3D from 5D. The vibration of Aquarius. I believe that's the vibration that holds reality together. And I believe that a low vibration would take you back in time and a high vibration would take you forward in time. That literally the speed at which things are vibrating determines what you end up seeing in your third eye and out of your eyes and the spectrum of color that you see. So the reason why this is an opportunity to go to 5D, which is a term that I learned, by the way, from other light workers and then applied astrology, like, well, where do I see this in astrology? I think it's happening from the perspective of these planets have entered into Aquarius. Now, what happens when you have energy vibrating higher? Right now we have Saturn in Aquarius for the first time since 1991. It's a 29 and a half year transit Saturn. So Saturn means we can now take responsibility. Saturn, we can make decisions. Capricorn, we can actually decide. We have the awareness and the visibility to decide what frequency Aquarius that we want to go into. So of course, we had this in 1991, and I honestly think that what ended the crazy 80s was Saturn in Aquarius. Once Saturn went in Aquarius, we're like, okay, we're done with this silly clothing. We're done with Coke. It's going to become, psychedelic. It's going to become club drugs now. Like the whole vibration of what we want to vibe with and what vibes with us and doesn't vibe with us, it changed between the 80s and 90s. And I think that was Saturn in Aquarius. So one gateway to 5D is, hey, Saturn's in Aquarius. We can decide and take command over where we vibe. At the same time, Jupiter this time has moved into Aquarius. And this is the first time Saturn and Jupiter have been in Aquarius for a very long time. I think it was 1602, if I'm not mistaken, was the last time they were together. And Jupiter brings awareness. To me, the keywords to Jupiter is, did you know? So Jupiter's like, did you know you can switch dimensions? Did you know that color and numbers are the same thing? Jupiter gives us awareness. And I think what's interesting is there is a huge generation of past life Atlanteans who are incarnated right now. And just as predicted, it's happening. With Jupiter now in Aquarius, they're remembering. I have clients telling me they're having Atlantis dreams, that they're having flashbacks. That's Jupiter saying, did you know you were in Atlantis? Did you know you're in a past life? And I think what it does is literally it brings the ability for us to be aware of these frequencies and for us to shift to different frequencies, like shift back in time and see the past and whatnot. So the reason why this is going to happen in a big way is Saturn and Jupiter they could leave Aquarius as they always do, and then we will just quickly forget, as we always do as a society. And so it's like, oh yeah, that was nice. Those were good times, but now we're facing other stuff. Except this time we have Pluto entering into Aquarius. And Pluto has not been in Aquarius since really the United States Revolution. 1775 to 1783 was the last time Pluto was in Aquarius. It wasn't in Aquarius when Saturn and Jupiter were, so it was forcing innovation at that time, but people were unaware. They didn't realize they were creating the country that would set the foundation of democracy for the world. Like, they didn't realize the consequences of it. They just didn't like taxes. You know what I mean? So Jupiter and Saturn wasn't there. They were unaware of why they were evolving, but they were evolving. So what makes this particular time different is we have this 1, 2, 3 punch. That we have the responsibility Saturn, that we have the awareness Jupiter, and then we have Pluto entering in from 2024 to 2043. Pluto will be there for 20 years. And Pluto is the final line. It is step 0. So what this does is, to me, this is the math that allows a person to become aware of these other frequencies, to take command of those other frequencies, and then Pluto makes it the step 0. Pluto is step 0. So that means that people take that awareness and they make it the 0 foundation of their life. So I think that's the math of how a person can go. Now, when I talk about passing people by, it's all about awareness and what you choose to adopt and what you choose to live in. And I think many people are introduced to things, but they're not quite ready yet to hold that tone on their own, to hold that vibration on their own. I believe to go to these higher dimensions, you simply have to let go of the lower ones. We tend to think, oh, I want to go higher. It's really let go of the lower is what I'm finding. Like, that's the trick, which our ego doesn't want to and whatnot. So I believe that we're in a particular period right now where if you are aware and you are constantly shedding and letting this old stuff go, you will naturally, I think, vibrate higher into these higher spectrums. And from what I understand, I don't know, like, I'm just with you. I joked, like, when Atlantis fell, the descension was so much easier than ascension. Like, it was so much easier with the planet ruining itself than it is trying to grow. Like, there's so much pain, we're letting go of so much crap. Like, and I keep wondering, like, are we just going to wake up one day and be in Shambhala with Jesus and like, are we just going to, and from what I've read from certain books, like, that's how it is. When a person ascends, that you literally see different parts of reality that are invisible to the naked eye right now, that literally our vibration will go to that level. I don't know how far we're going to take it, but as far as my subscribers and the people I teach, my goal is to help everyone leave 3D behind at minimum.
I love that so much. And what do you think is going to happen with, it seems like just the mainstream world is descending more in some ways, but then we have these other pockets of, communities like this that is so ascending. Do you think there's going to be like a split of like 2 different societies happening on the same planet and we like don't know about each other or something?
That's a good question. From what I understand, first of all, in ancient civilization, there already are 2 societies on the planet. One of them is underground. Like, from what I understand, the ancients ended up, the ones who were wise and awake, they went downstairs into the basement while the monkeys threw poop at each other, for 3,000 years. So it wouldn't surprise me that we decide to coexist and we split into 2. Aquarius energy is very interesting that way because it is about belonging and not belonging. It's very dualistic. And, if you know Aquariuses, they're like Geminis. There's 2 sides of that coin. They're showing you the friendly side, but there's an unfriendly side too, or there's a shadow side too. So, the age of Aquarius and what they were singing about in the 70s, they were only talking about one side of it, the side that their heart belonged with. They weren't talking about the side their heart doesn't belong with. So it's a possibility. I feel intuitively that that will be at least the next chapter is a division, because the way God seems to work, dare I say, is to give people choices, and that's how we learn. So I would imagine there'll be a phase where there's two distinct choices on earth, very, very clear choices, probably very black and white choices because we're all in kindergarten. And at least in this lifetime, I think we'll end up with a split.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And a question that I have always wondered is, why is Aquarian considered more idyllic than Piscean? Like, isn't Piscean water emotions? Why is that considered masculine?
That's a good question. I think it's because it's so airy and it's intellectual. From what I understand, we come from a universal mind of God, and the mind itself is not gender specific. But here in the incarnation of life, the mind tends to be more male associative, and water tends to be more female associative. As far as Aquarius is concerned, let's be clear, its enlightenment stops with physical. Aquarius does not take you into God consciousness. It is not, it is a physical vibration. It's the highest you can get in the physical, but it does not connect to the angelic realm, for instance. I think Aquarius connects to different times, it connects to different dimensions of physicality. But if you want to talk to an angel, you got to go through Pisces.
So after this age of Aquarius, we're going to have the age of Pisces then? Or we are just finished the age of Pisces?
No, after the age of Aquarius, we'll have the age of Capricorn.
Okay.
We go backwards. So from what I understand, we'll build great civilizations and build up based on this new vibration, this new basis. Aquarius is the vibration in which manifestation is built. So right now we're vibrating at 3D. And so I would imagine that some of us will be able to vibrate at 5D. And I'm guessing that some people will be left in 3D. And then once you go into Capricorn, the age of Capricorn, that's 2,000 years of building based on that new vibration.
Okay. So it won't be like the same type of Capricorn that we know that's very industrial and governmental and judicial. It would be the complete building of this new 5D consciousness civilizations.
That's what I believe. But I also believe that it's quite possible that, from what I'm studying with like ascended masters and stuff, they live in the high dimension right around us, apparently. Like apparently there are 5D cities already. I'm just reading this. I don't know. So I'm wondering if this is just a big cycle that for those people who are in 5D, they're going to now build these new 5D worlds. And for those who stay in 3D, it's going to be darkness and slavery and taking those 3D components and bringing them under absolute control under those frequencies and those rules. And I wonder if we'll even see each other. I don't know if you study the alien stuff, but apparently Venus is apparently popping. I mean, apparently there's a whole race of people on Venus. And why don't we know this? Because apparently it's in a different vibrational frequency and it's beyond our current sight.
Yeah, true. I mean, even like our different lifetimes are simultaneously happening right now, but we're just unaware of them. We just have to think of them as past or future, but it's all here now.
Yeah, and from what I'm studying and guessing is it's simply that in that life you were vibing a different frequency. So if you were to change your frequency right now and meditate on that frequency, theoretically you could go back to that time.
Yeah, it's fascinating what causes one person to awaken. I think a lot of us feel like the black sheeps in our family or feel this like responsibility to like wake our family up. I'm putting in quotes, or to, like cause them to make decisions that we feel are the best for them. And it is creating a lot of division right now within families. Why do you think that so many of us are born into families that are so committed to the vibration that they are at?
I think most of the time when I look at astrology and charts in particular and past life stuff, because I download past life information very easily in a reading, a lot of times you'd be surprised, but a lot of times like the person in your family that is the agitator, the one that's being really harsh and whatever, is actually playing the role of you in the prior life. So a lot of times you're disgusted by seeing yourself again doing the same thing in your mother, or you're disgusted at seeing your father doing the same thing you did. So I think in many times with my clients, you choose a family that keeps you from falling into that pattern you were once in. And it's a guarantee you won't do it because it's ugly and it's out there in your face. And what you're seeing is how you operate in that life. And that's also part of the karma. You were once the one yelling at everyone, and now you're the one being yelled at, and you're understanding. But you also have this, one light worker per thousand sort of mentality, right? And I think there really are evolved souls who make a point to always try to be their brightest. And they are spiritual engineers of reality. And those spiritual engineers, which I believe you are one, incidentally, just given your work, they deliberately put themselves in the middle of a puddle because their light and their vibration raises the whole puddle. And ultimately, I think where we get confused is we want to reach out and have them change with our own hands. But the greatest change is when the person and client decides to change on their own. That's the change that they own and they take to the bank. So for many of us who are stuck in these sort of puddles, recognize, I believe your job, if you want to call it that, is to simply be yourself and vibrate at your highest. Because when they see your joy, when they feel your heart, when they see your smile, they want it too. And they will begin to reach out at the glowy, shiny object. And so I think for the people who are mastering reality, such as yourself, part of your master path is not losing touch with yourself as you climb, which is, I think, one of the lessons masters have. Masters get very interested in helping the world. They want to help the whole world. They've done all the basics. They're done with that. And they're excited to do, make a difference. And what happens is being new at being a master, they start doing their thing and they allow their surroundings or their people, their relationships to sort of take away from that pedestal that they had built for themselves in past lives. So really, it's a dual lesson. You're learning how to hold your own and be a master regardless of reality and other people's choices. And they have a shining beacon of light to compare themselves to. And sometimes people take a whole lifetime. I've seen parents that it's not till the very end of their life that they realize their kid was right. You were right, goodbye. The kid's like, yeah. So we can't have our own self-worth get caught up in that. I think it's just a master path, a master lesson. As you walk down the ascended path, you realize angels allow people to suffer until they ask. The light will allow people to fall into one because it's all fake anyways. It's a big illusion. You're going to die and be perfect again as you started. So we take life way too seriously. It's all simulation. It doesn't mean that much, right? But you also realize as a master that the ascended masters and the angels, they let the other people stay in the mud until they cry out for help. And that's when they step forward. So I think that's part of our lesson as masters, is not to go rescue.
And what if you feel like you have cried out for help for something, or you have practiced the manifestation, it's still not coming? Is it something that you're doing wrong? Is it just not the right time? Some people say it's not no, it's not now. But are there sometimes just no's?
There's never no. In fact, there's never no, it's always not now. The worst case scenario, it's not now, I think, in many cases. And a lot of times a client, for instance, is wanting their career right now, but they're going through what we call a fourth house transit, which is building their home and family. So basically the energy of the planets, for instance, is helping you with a different part of your story. You're this way around the block, and this is the part of you that you're developing, which is your foundation or your emotional self. And people are wanting to get to the fruit. And why can't I pick the fruit? Why can't I have the fruit? Well, you're currently working on the root system. And many times people are, working on that root system. But here's the thing. In my teaching and coaching, they still attract the job, but they're not ready. I, for one, it's never what they want. Well, this isn't what I wanted. But you said, let's manifest a job. You got a job. It's not the job I wanted. Well, I don't think you're going to manifest a job that you want unless you have that root system in. So you want this gigantic, successful career, and you haven't built a basic watering system to your emotional self. How are you going to lead a whole team of people when you aren't emotionally standing on a solid ground yourself? It's just not in the metaphysics. It's consciously not going to happen. So a lot of times, that's where people's ego, the ego wants it now, wants instant now. And so that's where it's sometimes not now, is because the ego is wanting something. And this is where the steps help me. It's like people want step 11 where it becomes real, or step 10, and they haven't worked on step 3. They don't really believe that it's possible. And they're wanting to manifest this big thing. So in most cases, when people aren't getting what they want, it's because they're not addressing one of these steps. One of their other states of awareness inside of them is actually fighting against the goal. Their heart wants it, their this wants it, but their boundaries are afraid it won't happen, and their ego is not pointing in that right direction, or it's scattered. And that's what the 11 steps have taught me. And basically the principle of the manifestation is that all of yourself has to be in alignment with what you want to manifest. If half of you is wanting one thing and half of you is wanting the other, you're going to get just that. You're going to get partnerships that are half in. You're going to get jobs that are half in. Everything you see is going to be half in because you're half in. It's going to be a reflection of you. In some cases, it is also just that it's not in the cards now. People have wonderful imaginations. I actually read this one book about an ascended master where a person was ascending, and the night before he ascended, the ascended masters created this giant palace in the middle of the woods for him to sleep in one night. I don't know if you ever heard this story. And they literally just manifest this palace out of nowhere and out of gold and jewels and everything. And then when he woke up, the palace was gone. And he asked the ascended master, why, if I'm ascending, did you manifest this palace? And they said, hundreds of lifetimes ago, you spent an entire life wishing to live in a palace of gold. And you could not ascend Earth until you had fulfilled that wish. And this is why Buddhists say, be careful what you attach to and what you want. So the answer is, it's not now. Because even if you want to ascend and you don't want it anymore, because your soul requested it in reality, it's my understanding it has to come at some point for you to leave. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really just shows us that we truly can have whatever we desire. It's just really syncing up and getting very specific on these different step numbers. And I think that's such a beautiful system to see where you may be out of alignment, because sometimes we think, oh, just must not be in the cards for me, or, oh, this earth is so dense, it couldn't have happened. But really, there's something in the foundation that's not allowing it to happen.
I believe so. I believe you're not talented enough yet. You're not experienced enough yet. I believe from what I understand and where we're headed, the whole Jesus water wine thing is a real thing. That human beings reach a state where they have command over reality and that they can manifest and create things out of thin air. Like, we literally have that potential in us. And so it's really just our own ignorance. We haven't learned yet how to use our powers. And in most cases, people are not awake enough to their whole being. Their ego really wants it, but their minds are on another track. Their heart is wishing for it, but they're emotionally bringing damage to the table. So in most cases, it's just that we have to cycle through these parts of ourselves, be aware, and align our entire self towards that intention.
Yeah, I think it's like that balance between, the steps before and then action and then letting go. I think what happens is once we get into action, then it becomes this like keep going and going and going until it happens. It feels like off, or we're going to lose momentum if we stop to receive and let go, because we feel like, well, it's not going to just magically appear. So I know that that's the fine line that a lot of people struggle with.
I agree. That's brilliant too, because step 9 is the ego, where we take the action. But then step 10 is where you love and trust. So this step 10 is to love and trust. And that trust really is interaction with reality, I believe. So the example you just gave, that person launched whatever they wanted and they were pushing. They weren't listening to reality to see what reality said. They weren't listening to the water to see if it wanted to become wine. They were just commanding it to become wine and not listening to the water. That's the thing. We are connected to all the conscious around us. So when you say to detach to outcome, I agree. You put your goal out there and then you step back and you wait for God to knock back. Like you knock on the door, you wait for a spiritual answer. Once you start doing magic, it's an interaction with reality. And reality might tell you. So for me and myself, for instance, when I manifest, I'm constantly going to my intuition. I know when I'm to put energy out there, and I hold my space and I wait. Should I push now or should I wait? I ask spirit, is it time to push? Is it time to wait? And at that point, I'm in a relationship with spirit. It's not my identity. The I is a separation from consciousness. So the I creates the desire, but then after you create that desire, you go back to we.
I love that so much. Asking, is it time to take action or step back and receive, and having that dynamic relationship. So it's not just like, keep going until I get there. And it's also not just like, okay, I'm going to sit back and just like, do nothing. And it's going to magically appear without me getting on Craigslist and searching for the house,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's an interaction. And I think that's how magic works too. I think even when you want something, for instance, if you're trying to manifest a car, we think of that car as inanimate, but it's not. It's a complicated form of consciousness that decided to be a car. And that car, believe it or not, is aware. It's all God consciousness. Now science is calling me a lunatic right now, but I know I talk to my car, you know what I mean? Like, and I know it talks to me. I have plenty of examples, because it's energetically falling and the car wants to work for me. That's the beautiful thing about consciousness. Trees want to be a tree to help other people. Christopher Witecki wants to be an astrologer to help other people. Cars want to be a car to help other people. All we really have here is to help each other. So I think, and that's what everything is doing around us. So humans, where we're ignorant asleep is, we see this as separate. We see it as inanimate. We see it as dead. We show up disrespecting its awareness and its consciousness, and then we expect it to do something for us. So I think we're evolving into understanding this true relationship dynamic with reality, that it's our partner.
Love that so much. So, what tips do you have for listeners? We are now moving into June of 2021. So, for June and beyond, I know we just completed now when this episode's going out, Malibu May,
Yeah.
and entering into some maybe rockier months. How is it looking?
It's looking rocky, to be honest with you. A lot of people have written to me and said, this isn't Malibu. And I'm like, wait till you see June. It's Malibu. One thing about me is that I always predict with positivity because I'm giving you that option to take, because you have that option to take as your own approach to it, which makes it a little bit easier. Some people say I gloss over and I sugarcoat things. I'm trying to coach into manifesting the path the easy way. Is what I'm here to do, is to help you find the easy way. I can make it hell. We can pretend it's going to be hell. And then it will be because we want it to be, or it could be a fantastic lesson. But to answer your question, we're about to go through tremendous change. And in fact, actually, when I got on board 15 years ago, when I got on YouTube to do astrology, I was actually looking at this year as the year I was preparing for, was between 2021 and 2022. In a big picture sense, we're wrapping up Pluto in Capricorn is the issue here. Pluto's at 26 degrees Capricorn right now, the same degree as your midheaven. 26 is the grandmaster, the controlling pin, basically. So it is the energy, it is the degree in which all control comes from. So Pluto being on the 26th degree means that Pluto is eroding or killing off ancient systems of control that we've been basically using since early 1500s. That was the last time that that created this sort of energy. So the last time Pluto was in Capricorn was in the 1700s, but this current system that we have of like Capricorn control came out of the 1500s. So what we're going to end up doing is decaying that. I'm expecting from this month forward in June, there's a square between Saturn and Uranus that is at 13 degrees, which is a transformative degree. It's on June 14th. And I'm expecting that to be some sort of a karate chop to that Pluto 26 degree tree. So some sort of system of control is likely going to collapse. And I'm not sure how fast it'll collapse, but it does look like it's basically collapsing from June until really the next year. In fact, July 12th, 2022 is the Pluto return to the exact place of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. So the United States is having what we call our Pluto return. So the United States, which isn't the whole world by any means, but it is the pinnacle of democracy, this democracy experiment, this free trade experiment where anyone can become something if they just dream about it. There's a lot of concepts under the umbrella of the United States that are feeding the world, basically. And so the United States is going to go through some sort of change that begins in February, is when the Pluto return begins, and the Pluto return ends by next July. So basically hold on to your hat and your seats. The good news is that human beings individually are well prepared. People don't feel they're well prepared, but because of the step system, these planets moved through all the lower degrees before they got to these higher degrees, which means human beings have already had to face the issues inside of themselves about being strong enough, about being there for themselves, about facing their shadow and facing their puddles. It's interesting, in the last year with the lockdown, we were completing a couple of really key transits for personal development, Chiron in Aries and Uranus in Taurus. They finished these very personal degrees. So I'm expecting the world to start falling apart in certain ways. And I would think that old control regimens are going to be what ends up falling apart. So perhaps something along
Maybe
the
like
line.
a new type of presidential system. Like, I just think the whole presidential system is not working for people. I don't know. I didn't even think there would be another president after Trump. I thought maybe he would be the last one. So I feel like, yeah, it must be something with the fact that there's so much division in this country. Like, at any time, 50% of the people hate the president is like, this isn't really a sustainable system.
Yeah, well, I think we have to take a look at it for sure. The forefathers are pretty brilliant, though. We want to point fingers at, one branch of government, but the truth is the system has managed to stay together, right? I do think we'll probably have another constitutional convention. I do think that we'll probably redefine the United States in a new way. At the moment, the way and that you can see that conversation already happening. They're talking about packing the court with judges, and they're talking about so that there's conversation, and they're talking about a constitutional amendment. And I can't remember why. I guess for the Electoral College is the excuse they're using right now for a constitutional amendment. Some states have signed on to want to change the Electoral College. So you can feel all this energy sort of brewing underneath that there's going to be change. But I suspect we will still have the same system we have, but better.
Okay. So you think it would be some sort of like internal system, not like a war, civil war or something like that?
I think that we're being pushed to civil war, but the truth is if you talk to two Americans on the street, they're not very mad at each other. I think this is not true as far as what media is pushing, that Americans are hating each other. Americans are not hating each other. I know people on both sides of the vaccine conversation, and both sides are worried about the other side dying. The ones taking the vaxes are worried about people who don't take the vaxes. The people who don't take the vaxes are worried about people who do take the vax. We're both worrying about each other. That's love. So the media has made this out to be a problem, I think. But honestly, I believe that there are false control mechanisms. So there's a lot of cheating going on. There's a lot of cheating in the world banking system. There's a lot of cheating in the world petroleum trading system. There are a lot of cartels. There are a lot of businesses that have tied together and taken away freedom, taken away the ability to climb up from the bottom. And so what I predict and what I hope for, let's put it this way, what I'm hoping will collapse is the corruption. That's what I'm hoping is going to collapse. And I think America is being told that our country is on the verge of collapse, when the truth is that we are riddled with viruses and we are riddled with corruption. And so this system that was designed incredibly well is riddled with a lot of fingers in the pie. And I'm suspecting if we just remove the corruption, the system actually works.
And have you received any downloads on cryptocurrency and that being the currency of the future?
I believe that whatever's being created now is most likely the fundaments of the future. I don't know how it will unfold, but it's certainly the fundaments. Uranus is in Taurus, and so we actually created our last economic system, right around that same time, FDR and going off the gold standard. That was all right before Uranus went into Taurus, and then Uranus sort of in Taurus ran with that new system. So if you compare it to that last time when we went off the gold standard during the Depression and then moved into Taurus, it's sort of the same timing. Cryptocurrency was sort of created at the same time that we went off the gold standard the last time. And so I'm suspecting that it's going to go down this path and be a standard. I do believe an independent currency is part of the age of Aquarius.
So fascinating.
Freedom is very important in Aquarius. And that's a good example. The current monetary system is controlled by a few families. It's not democratic by any means, or fair by any means, or independent, and very easily corrupted, right? So I'm hoping and praying that we move to a completely independent system. But it's come to human beings to decide that they don't want to be controlled by those old systems.
Absolutely. Wow. So many wonderful insights and things we can look forward to, even if it's going to be a bumpy road. I think we all signed up to be here, part of this experience and this ascension. And if anyone is listening to this episode and this deep in, I believe they are part of it. We're all volunteers coming back down.
I completely agree. I think a lot of people were in Atlantis in this lifetime, and I tend to be very hopeful. I was born believing that we were going to enter into a new age of light in this lifetime. And that was before any of this happened. And it's been a constant. So I do believe we've come down to get it right, not get it wrong. And I think the reason why we fear it going wrong is because it did in the past life. And to some degree, I even think with COVID, a lot of that was about people overcoming their bubonic plague trauma. and people who had died from plagues. That had to happen, the fear of COVID, just to get that fear out of the system. So recognize that sometimes the things that appear bad is us actually healing from the bad. It's not that bad is coming.
Yeah, I love that so much, realizing that we're going to be safe in this lifetime.
I believe we are. And I believe you and I definitely have come for that. And I think a lot of these Atlanteans have come to get it right and to make it so. But being drama queens that we are as humans, it'll be the last minute, the last hour. The hero's hand will just come over the cliff after he fell over the cliff, the last minute. That's the one thing about our collective consciousness I say to everyone. It's like every movie we've watched for the last 30 years have been a happy ending. That's built in our collective consciousness. All of us are collectively writing a happy ending subconsciously every day.
Just we feel like we got to really struggle and battle the evil guy to the last second to get there. And it's like, maybe we can take an easier path.
Maybe we can
do some deep healing with the villain and help him see that he is also the light, and come together and give each other a hug and ascend together.
I would love that. The devil having a drink with God.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much deep wisdom with us today. And where can listeners become a part of Sirius Joy and get your 5 texts a day based off of what is happening in their chart?
Oh, my pleasure. I created a service called Sirius Joy. It's spelled like the star, Sirius, for the brightest star in the sky. And this system I developed because I would give readings to clients every year, and they come back and they hadn't necessarily worked through the issue that I had set out for them, their sort of plan. And I thought, wouldn't it be awesome if I could just spoon feed a lesson plan to the client and be with them? And as technology evolved, I was able to do that. So it's SiriusJoy.com. That is where my service is. And actually, we've done a promo for you, Sahara. If they put in the promo code Sahara at checkout, they'll get the first 2 months for the introductory price of $3.99 a month. So you'll get 60 days for $3.99 a month. And see for yourself over the 60 days. I basically take your chart, I digest it, and then I create a learning program for you based on where your sign is growing, and send you little coaches that just do slight little adjustments of what to pay attention to each day. And also the service has a daily pep talk where every morning I come on and I do like a 30-minute explanation of the day, what you're going to experience. We do a little telepathy practice. We work on your psychic ability. I do a little breath work. We do a couple Om chants. I do celebrity birthdays. It's like 30 minutes. It sets you on your way. And between that and the text messages, my clients all come back and tell me that their puddles dry up. They find their confidence. Most of it is that you had someone with you along the way. So that's at SiriusJoy.com. And if you want to watch my weekly show, I do a weekly show about an hour and a half. I put it on Saturday night, so it's available for Sundays. It's like my Sunday service, basically. You can watch it every week for free at SiriusJoy.tv. So the show is at .tv and the service is at SiriusJoy.com. And enter the code Sahara to get your first 2 months for $3.99.
Amazing. I so recommend it. I have my husband, mom, and brother all on it too. And my mom, every time she gets a text, sends it to me to tell me what's happening in her chart, which is really cute because she never knew about astrology before. So it really is digestible and easy even for someone who doesn't know any astrology.
Yes, thank you for saying that. I don't make it you can go in the astrology if you dive deep, but basically it's just sort of how to deal with your emotions today, or that you might have your subconscious bubbling up and that sort of thing. And we have a new feature coming out in a couple of weeks here where you can actually track your whole family inside the app. So you'll be able to put your mom and your husband and stuff, and you'll see in the app, we call it My Tribe, you'll see your whole family, what their moods are today and what they're working on. So you can sort of be a better support to your family. That's our next version coming out.
Oh, I love that. So good. Well, thank you again for sharing with us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've been looking forward to it for a long time, actually.
Yay.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I really have. You have a great talk show, and your energy is very grounding, I just have to say. It's really easy to listen to you and go into different topics.
Thank you so much. It's all the Capricorn.
You are a smooth operator.
Thank you. Been doing this for 23 lifetimes.
It's showing, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. Wow. I so loved that conversation. I love bringing on people on the podcast who are teachers to me and who bring in a totally different essence and frequency and message. And that is so what Christopher Witecki delivered today. Wow. I have a lot more to dive into step astrology, and I'm super excited to put the principles of the different steps into action towards a manifestation. It feels really good to have like a pathway towards something and something you could focus on each day. So if you do want to try out his app, I highly recommend it. SiriusJoy.com/Sahara. And he's generously gifting us 2 months at only $3.99. And again, if you want to dive in deeper into understanding your Dharma, your soul's purpose, come join me in my 21-day Dharma discovery journey. You can find that link in the show notes or iamsahararose.com/Dharma discovery. Thank you, Organifi and Safe Sleep, for supporting this episode. And I'm so grateful for you for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful day and dive into all of the different wavelengths out there. Namaste.